The dusty streets of Angel's Camp, California stretched out beneath the afternoon sun in the summer of 1878, and Sarah Zimmerman stood outside the Mercantile with her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces as John Whitaker, the banker's son, told her she was too young for him at 18 years old, and that he needed someone more mature to be his wife. Sarah's cheeks burned with humiliation as she watched John tip his hat and walk away, leaving her standing alone with a basket of goods clutched in her trembling hands. The rejection stung worse than any bee, and she fought back tears as she turned to head home. She had thought John cared for her, had believed his sweet words and gentle smiles meant something more than empty flirtations. Now she understood that to him, she had been nothing but a passing amusement. The walk back to her family's small ranch on the outskirts of town felt longer than usual. Her father had passed away 2 winters ago, leaving Sarah and her mother to manage the property as best they could. They had a few cattle, some chickens, and enough land to grow vegetables, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain without a man's help. Her mother had suggested more than once that Sarah should find a husband, someone strong who could help them keep the ranch running. Sarah had thought John might be that man, but clearly she had been mistaken. As she approached the weathered fence that marked their property line, Sarah noticed a figure near the barn. Her breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively tightened her grip on the basket. A tall man stood beside a beautiful chestnut horse, his broad-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He wore dusty trail clothes and had the lean, muscular build of someone who spent his days in the saddle. Sarah's mother emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sarah, this is Lucas Zane. He's looking for work, and I thought we could use an extra hand around here." Lucas turned at the sound of her mother's voice, and Sarah got her first clear look at him. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking shade of gray-blue that seemed both weary and kind at the same time. There was a loneliness in those eyes that resonated with something deep inside her own chest. "Madam," Lucas said, removing his hat and nodding respectfully to Sarah. His voice was low and smooth, with a slight drawl that suggested he had spent time in Texas, or perhaps further south. "Mr. Zane," Sarah replied, trying to compose herself despite the emotional turmoil still churning inside her from John's rejection. "I was just telling Mr. Zane that we cannot afford to pay much," her mother continued, "but we can offer room and board in the small cabin out back, and whatever we can spare from our earnings." Lucas replaced his hat and nodded slowly. "That would be fine, madam. I am not looking to get rich. I just need honest work and a place to rest my head for a while." There was something in the way he spoke those words that made Sarah curious. He sounded like a man running from something, or perhaps running towards something he had not yet found. Either way, she sensed he was as lost as she felt in that moment. Over the following days, Lucas proved himself to be a tireless worker. He repaired the broken sections of fence that Sarah and her mother had been unable to fix, mucked out the barn, tended to the cattle, and even helped with the heavier household chores. He spoke little, kept to himself in the small cabin, and seemed content with his own company during meals. Sarah found herself watching him when she thought he would not notice. There was a quiet competence to everything he did, a careful precision that spoke of years spent working with his hands. She wondered about his story, about what had brought a man like him to their small ranch in Angel's Camp. One evening, nearly a week after Lucas had arrived, Sarah brought him dinner at the cabin. Her mother usually performed this task, but she had been feeling poorly, so Sarah had volunteered. She knocked softly on the door and waited. "Come in," Lucas called from inside. Sarah pushed open the door to find the cabin neat and orderly. Lucas sat at the small table, cleaning his rifle. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes before he carefully set the weapon aside. "I brought your supper," Sarah said, setting the plate down on the table. "My mother is not feeling well tonight." "I hope it is nothing serious," Lucas said, standing out of courtesy. "Just tired, I think. She works too hard." An awkward silence fell between them. Sarah knew she should leave, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Finally, she found the courage to speak. "Where are you from, Mr. Zane?" Lucas studied her for a long moment before answering. "Originally from Missouri. Been wandering for the better part of 5 years now." "That is a long time to be on the road." "I suppose it is." He paused, then added, "Sometimes a man needs distance from his past." Sarah recognized that feeling all too well. "What are you running from?" The question was too bold, too personal, and she immediately regretted asking it. But Lucas did not seem offended. Instead, a sad smile touched his lips. "Loneliness, mostly. Figured if I kept moving, I might outrun it." He met her eyes directly. "Has not worked so far." The honesty in his answer touched something deep within Sarah. "I understand that feeling." "Do you?" There was genuine curiosity in his voice now. Before she could stop herself, the whole story came tumbling out. She told him about John Whitaker, about the rejection, about being dismissed as too young and immature. The words flowed like water from a broken dam, and Lucas listened without interruption. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would echo in her mind for days to come. "A man who rejects someone for being young is a fool. Youth means more years together, more time to build a life, more seasons to share. If I were lucky enough to find someone who wanted to spend their life with me, I would thank God for every extra year we had." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The simple wisdom in his words, the gentle way he spoke them, made her see her rejection in an entirely new light. John Whitaker had not rejected her because she was lacking. He had rejected her because he was too blind to see what truly mattered. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." Lucas nodded, his gray-blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Any man would be fortunate to have you, Miss Zimmerman." Sarah left the cabin that night with her heart feeling lighter than it had in days. As she walked back to the main house under a sky full of stars, she realized that Lucas Zane was the first man who had truly seen her, who had looked past her age and recognized her worth. The summer days grew warmer, and Sarah found more and more excuses to work alongside Lucas. They mended fences together, herded the cattle, and worked in the vegetable garden. At first, their conversations were brief and stilted, but gradually they began to open up to one another. Lucas told her about his childhood in Missouri, about parents who had died of fever when he was 16, and about the younger sister he had tried to raise on his own. His voice grew thick with emotion when he spoke of how she had died of pneumonia 3 winters past, leaving him alone in the world. "That is when I started drifting," he admitted as they took a break from their work one afternoon. They sat in the shade of an old oak tree, sharing water from a canteen. "Could not stand to be in that house anymore, seeing her things, remembering her laughter. So I sold everything and just started riding." "I am sorry," Sarah said softly. "I lost my father 2 years ago. I know how it feels to have that emptiness." Lucas looked at her with understanding. "Your mother told me, said he was a good man. He was the best." Sarah smiled at the memory. "He used to say that the measure of a person was not in what they said but in what they did when no one was watching." Wise words. "I think he would have liked you," Sarah said, then blushed at her own boldness. Lucas's expression softened. "I would have liked to meet him." The moment stretched between them, charged with an awareness that Sarah had never experienced before. This was different from what she had felt with John. This was deeper, more real, like recognizing something she had been searching for without knowing it existed. As the weeks passed, Sarah's mother began to notice the way her daughter's eyes followed Lucas, and the way Lucas's gaze would seek out Sarah even in a crowded room. Martha Zimmerman was no fool. She recognized the signs of budding love when she saw them. But she also saw something else in Lucas Zane, a fundamental decency and quiet strength that reminded her of her late husband. One evening, after Lucas had returned to his cabin, Martha sat Sarah down at the kitchen table. "You care for him," she said simply. It was not a question. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Mama, I do not deny it, child. I have eyes." Martha reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "The question is, what do you intend to do about it? I do not know if he feels the same way." Martha laughed, a warm sound that filled the kitchen. "Oh, my dear girl, that man looks at you like you are the sun and moon combined. He is just too honorable to say anything." "Why would that stop him?" "Because you are young, Sarah. Because he is living in our cabin and working for us. He probably thinks it would be taking advantage." Martha squeezed her hand. "But if you care for him, truly care for him, then you need to let him know. Life is too short to let happiness slip away because of pride or propriety." Sarah thought about her mother's words long into the night. The next day was Sunday, and as was their custom, they attended services at the small church in Angel's Camp. Lucas accompanied them, dressed in his cleanest shirt and looking uncomfortable in the formal setting. After the service, several of the townspeople approached to greet them. Sarah noticed John Whitaker standing with a young woman she did not recognize. He saw Sarah and had the grace to look ashamed, quickly turning away. "That the fellow who broke your heart?" Lucas asked quietly, having followed her gaze. "Yes," Sarah admitted. Lucas studied John for a moment, then shook his head slightly. His loss. Those two simple words meant more to Sarah than any flowery speech. They walked back to the wagon together, and Sarah made a decision. She would take her mother's advice. Life was indeed too short. That evening, Sarah waited until after supper to approach the cabin again. She had dressed carefully in her best Sunday dress, even though it was a weeknight. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door. Lucas opened it, his expression surprised. "Miss Zimmerman, is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I was wondering if you might take a walk with me. It is a beautiful evening." He hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Let me get my hat." They walked in silence for a while, following the path that led toward the creek at the edge of the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled of wild grass and sage, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out. "Lucas," Sarah began, then stopped, her courage faltering. He turned to face her, his expression gentle. "What is it, Sarah?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips gave her the strength she needed. "That night when I told you about John, you said that youth means more years together. Did you mean that? Every word? Then why have you not said anything?" The question came out more forcefully than she intended. "Why do you keep your distance when I can see in your eyes that you feel something too?" Lucas looked away, his jaw tightening. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because I have nothing to offer you, Sarah. I am a drifter, a man with no home and no prospects. You deserve someone established, someone who can give you stability and security." "I do not want someone established," Sarah said, stepping closer to him. "I want someone who sees me, truly sees me. Someone who understands what it means to be lonely, who knows the value of connection. Someone who makes me feel like I matter." "You do matter." Lucas turned back to her, and she could see the battle playing out in his eyes. "You matter more than you know." "Then stop pushing me away," Sarah whispered. Stop deciding what I deserve and let me choose for myself." For a long moment, Lucas simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he reached out and cupped her face with his hand. His palm was rough from work, warm against her skin. "I am 10 years older than you," he said softly. "I have nothing but what I carry in my saddlebags, and I have been alone for so long that I am not sure I remember how to be anything else." "Then let me remind you," Sarah said, covering his hand with her own. "Let me show you that you do not have to be alone anymore." Something in Lucas's expression cracked, and suddenly he was pulling her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Sarah wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his chest, hearing the rapid beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "I am afraid," he admitted quietly. "Afraid of losing someone else I care about, afraid I will let you down." "We are all afraid," Sarah murmured. "But being afraid is no reason to turn away from happiness." Lucas pulled back just enough to look down at her face. Then, with infinite gentleness, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was a tender kiss, full of hope and longing and the promise of something beautiful. Sarah felt as if she were floating, as if all the pain of John's rejection had been worth it, because it had led her to this moment, to this man. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I do not deserve you," he said. "That is not for you to decide," Sarah replied with a small smile. "I have already made my choice." From that night forward, everything changed. Lucas and Sarah no longer tried to hide their feelings, and Martha gave them her blessing with a knowing smile. The transformation in Lucas was remarkable. The loneliness that had shadowed his eyes began to fade, replaced by a warmth and contentment that made him seem years younger. They spent every spare moment together, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. Lucas spoke of his desire to have his own ranch someday, a place where he could put down roots and build something lasting. Sarah shared her fears about losing the property, about not being strong enough to keep it running. "We will figure it out together," Lucas assured her. That is what partners do. One afternoon in late August, Lucas rode into town and returned with a package wrapped in brown paper. He found Sarah in the garden and handed it to her with an almost shy expression. "What is this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it." Sarah carefully unwrapped the package to find a beautiful length of blue fabric, soft and fine. Her breath caught. "Lucas, this is too expensive." "I have been saving my earnings," he said. "I wanted to get you something special. Thought maybe you could make a dress for the harvest dance next month." Sarah looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "You are planning to still be here next month?" Lucas took her hands in his. "Sarah, I am planning to be here for as long as you will have me. I am done drifting. I have found what I was looking for." "And what is that?" "Home," he said simply. "You are my home." Sarah threw her arms around his neck, and Lucas lifted her off the ground, spinning her in a circle as she laughed. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "I love you," Sarah said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I know it is fast and maybe it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Lucas Zane." Lucas's expression grew serious and tense. "I love you too, Sarah. Have loved you almost from the first moment I saw you, standing there with that basket and fire in your eyes. You brought me back to life." They kissed again. They're in the garden with the afternoon sun warm on their faces and the scent of tomatoes and herbs in the air. It was perfect and real and everything Sarah had never known she wanted. That evening at supper, Lucas asked Martha if he could speak with her privately. Sarah's heart raced as she watched them go out onto the porch together. Through the window, she could see Lucas standing hat in hand, speaking earnestly while her mother listened with a thoughtful expression. After what felt like an eternity, Martha embraced Lucas, and they both came back inside with smiles on their faces. "Mama," Sarah asked tentatively. "Lucas has something he would like to ask you," Martha said, her eyes twinkling. Lucas came to stand before Sarah, and to her shock, he lowered himself onto one knee. He pulled a small wooden box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple silver ring with a small stone that caught the lamplight. "Sarah Zimmerman," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his eyes. "I came to this ranch a lost man, looking for work and nothing more. But I found so much more than that. I found purpose, I found joy, and I found love. You saw something in me worth caring about when I had almost forgotten how to see it myself. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend all the years we have together showing you how much you mean to me?" Sarah could barely see him through her tears. "Yes," she managed to choke out. "Yes, of course, yes." Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Martha wiped at her own eyes with her apron, smiling broadly. "I believe this calls for celebration," Martha said. "I have been saving a bottle of elderberry wine for a special occasion." The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness and preparation. They decided to marry in early October, after the harvest was complete. The whole town was invited, and despite some raised eyebrows at the quick engagement, most people were genuinely happy for the couple. Sarah saw John Whitaker once more before the wedding, outside the general store. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes going to the ring on her finger. "I heard you are getting married," he said stiffly. "I am." "To that drifter your mother hired," Sarah felt a flash of anger. "To Lucas Zane, the man I love, the man who was wise enough to see value in youth rather than dismiss it as a flaw." John had the grace to flush. "Sarah, you did me a favor," Sarah interrupted. "Your rejection led me to someone who truly deserves my love. So thank you, John. I wish you well." She walked away without looking back, feeling lighter than air. That chapter of her life was closed and a new one was beginning. The wedding day arrived with clear blue skies and crisp autumn air. The ceremony was held at the church in Angel's Camp, with half the town in attendance. Sarah wore the dress she had made from the blue fabric Lucas had given her, and she had never felt more beautiful. Lucas stood at the altar in a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, looking handsome and slightly nervous. But when Sarah began her walk down the aisle on her mother's arm, his face broke into a smile that made her heart soar. The ceremony itself passed in a haze of joy. Sarah was aware of the reverend's words, of Lucas's strong hand holding hers, of the moment when he slipped a matching silver band onto her finger. And then the reverend was pronouncing them man and wife, and Lucas was kissing her as the congregation applauded. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed everyone twice over. There was music and dancing, laughter and well wishes. Sarah danced with Lucas under the stars, feeling like she was floating on air. Happy. Lucas murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. "More than I ever thought possible," Sarah replied honestly. "Me too," he said, pulling her closer. "Me too." As the night wore on and the guests began to depart, Sarah found a quiet moment with her mother. "Thank you," Sarah said, hugging her tightly, "for everything, for hiring Lucas, for supporting us, for believing in this." Martha held her daughter close. "I just want you to be happy, my darling girl, and I can see that he makes you happy." "He does," Sarah confirmed. "He really does." Later that night, alone in their newly prepared room in the main house, Lucas and Sarah lay wrapped in each other's arms. The window was open, letting in the cool night breeze and the sound of crickets chirping in the darkness. "Tell me what you are thinking," Sarah said softly, tracing patterns on Lucas's chest. "I am thinking that I cannot believe how lucky I am," Lucas replied. 6 months ago I was alone and purposeless. Now I have a wife, a home, a future. It feels like a miracle." "Not a miracle," Sarah corrected gently. "Just two lonely people finding each other at the right time." Lucas turned to look at her, his gray-blue eyes serious in the moonlight. "I promise you, Sarah, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of this gift. I will work hard, I will be faithful, and I will love you with everything I have." "I know you will," Sarah said, kissing him softly. "And I promise the same to you. We will build a good life together, Lucas. I know it." And they did. The first year of their marriage was full of hard work but also deep contentment. Lucas proved to be an excellent rancher, and under his guidance, the property began to thrive. They expanded their herd, improved the grazing land, and even managed to save a little money. Martha's health, which had been declining, seemed to improve with the happiness that filled the house. She doted on Lucas as if he were her own son, and he treated her with the respect and affection of a devoted child. In the spring of 1879, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "As certain as I can be," Sarah confirmed, smiling at his expression. Lucas let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, being careful not to hold her too tightly. "We are going to have a baby," he said, as if he could not quite believe it. "A baby, Sarah." "We are going to be parents," Sarah laughed, delighted by his reaction. Martha cried happy tears when they told her, and she immediately began planning for the new arrival. She dug out the cradle that had held Sarah as an infant and worked on repairing and refinishing it. Sarah spent her evenings sewing baby clothes, and Lucas began work on additions to the house to make room for their growing family. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and irritable. But through it all, Lucas was patient and attentive, bringing her water when she felt nauseated, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings, and holding her when she cried from exhaustion. "I am sorry," Sarah said one particularly difficult day. "I know I have been impossible to live with." "You are growing our child," Lucas said simply. "You are doing the most important work in the world. I am just trying to help however I can." In late November, as the first frost touched the ground, Sarah went into labor. The birthing was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following afternoon. Lucas paced outside the room where the midwife worked, looking haggard and terrified. When the baby's cry finally pierced the air, Lucas nearly collapsed with relief. Martha emerged from the room with tears streaming down her face. "You have a son," she said, embracing him. "A healthy, beautiful son, and Sarah is doing well." Lucas rushed into the room to find Sarah propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he entered, and her smile took his breath away. "Meet your son," she said softly. Lucas approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small, snuffling sounds. Lucas reached out one finger and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Sarah asked. Lucas thought for a moment. "What about William, after your father?" Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Papa would have loved that. William Zane. It is perfect." Lucas carefully sat on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Sarah and looking down at their son. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for this gift, for our family, for everything." "We did this together," Sarah reminded him, leaning her head against his shoulder. "William proved to be a healthy, robust baby with a strong set of lungs." The first few months were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and the constant demands of a newborn, but there was also an overwhelming sense of joy and completion. Lucas threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with William when he fussed at night. As winter turned to spring and spring to summer, William grew and thrived. He had his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's smile, and he was clearly going to be tall like Lucas. The ranch continued to prosper, and Lucas began to seriously discuss with Sarah the possibility of purchasing additional land from a neighboring property. "We have enough saved," he explained one evening after William was asleep. "And old Mr. Crawford is looking to sell. It would double our grazing land and give us room to expand the herd." "Do you think we can manage that much?" Sarah asked, though her eyes were bright with excitement. "With help, yes. I was thinking we might hire a hand or two during the busy seasons." Lucas took her hand. "I want to build something lasting, Sarah, something we can pass on to William and any other children we might have." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Then let us do it. Let us build our legacy." The deal with Mr. Crawford was finalized by early autumn, and suddenly, the Zane Ranch was one of the more substantial properties in the area. Lucas hired 2 young men to help with the work, and business boomed. They sold cattle in the fall that brought in more money than Sarah had ever seen. "Look at what we have built," Lucas said one evening as they stood together looking out over their land. William was balanced on his hip, chewing contentedly on a wooden toy Lucas had carved. "From nothing to this. It still amazes me." "You did this," Sarah said. "Your hard work, your vision." "We did this," Lucas corrected, just as he always did. "You and me together. That is what makes it possible." In the winter of 1880, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. When their second child arrived the following summer, it was another boy, whom they named Thomas after Lucas's father. Thomas was different from William in temperament, quieter and more contemplative, but just as loved. Lucas proved to be a devoted father to both boys, spending hours playing with them, teaching them about the ranch, and reading to them in the evenings. Martha continued to be a presence in their lives, though she was slowing down with age. She took great joy in her grandchildren and spent many afternoons telling them stories or helping them in the garden. One evening when William was 4 and Thomas was 2, Sarah and Lucas sat together on the porch after the boys were in bed. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "Do you ever think about that summer when we met?" Sarah asked, her head resting on Lucas's shoulder. "All the time," Lucas admitted. "I think about how lost I was, how convinced I was that I would spend the rest of my life alone. And I was so hurt by John's rejection," Sarah remembered. "I thought my heart was broken beyond repair. But really, it was just making room for something better," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "I meant what I said that night, you know, about youth meaning more years together. Every day with you is a gift I never thought I would have." "We have built such a good life," Sarah said contentedly. "Better than I ever imagined." "It is not done yet," Lucas said with a smile. "We have years ahead of us still, years to watch our boys grow, to maybe add more children to our family, to grow the ranch even more. The best is yet to come." And he was right. As the years passed, the Zane Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the area. Lucas's reputation for fair dealing and hard work made him a respected figure in Angel's Camp, and Sarah became known for her kindness and hospitality. They added a daughter to their family in 1883, a beautiful girl with Sarah's dark hair and Lucas's eyes, whom they named Elizabeth. The boys adored their little sister and were fiercely protective of her from the start. Martha lived to see all three of her grandchildren, passing away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1884. Her loss was deeply felt by the entire family, but especially by Sarah, who mourned the woman who had been her rock through so many difficult times. "She was so happy," Lucas said as they stood at her grave after the funeral. "She told me once that seeing us together, seeing our family, was one of her greatest joys." "She loved you like a son," Sarah said, wiping at her tears. "And I loved her like a mother," Lucas replied. "We were blessed to have her for as long as we did." Life continued with its mixture of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. There were difficult years when drought threatened their cattle, and good years when everything seemed to flourish. Through it all, Lucas and Sarah faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each passing season. William grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch and had a natural gift for working with animals. Thomas showed an aptitude for figures and books, eventually taking over much of the business management of the ranch. Elizabeth was spirited and independent, with a quick wit and a kind heart. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Sarah with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had left Angel's Camp since their wedding, and they spent a wonderful week exploring the city, dining in restaurants and staying in a real hotel. "This is amazing," Sarah said as they walked along the waterfront, watching the ships in the harbor. "But I cannot wait to get home to the children." Lucas laughed. "Me too. I guess we are both hopeless." "Not hopeless," Sarah corrected. "Just content with the life we have built." They returned home to 3 excited children and a ranch that had run smoothly in their absence. That evening, after the children were in bed, Lucas and Sarah sat in their bedroom, still unpacking from the trip. 10 years, Sarah mused. "It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all." "I know what you mean," Lucas said, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that you are my wife, that we have this family and this home." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "Do you remember what you said to me that night by the creek, when I asked you why you had not said anything about your feelings?" "I said I had nothing to offer you," Lucas recalled. "And you were so wrong," Sarah said, reaching up to cup his face. "You offered me everything that truly matters: love, partnership, respect, a future. John Whitaker wanted someone mature, someone his own age. But you saw that my youth meant we would have more time together, more years to build something beautiful." "And we have," Lucas said, leaning down to kiss her softly. "We really have." More years passed, bringing with them the natural changes and challenges of life. The ranch continued to thrive under their stewardship, and their children grew into fine young adults. William married a sweet girl from town and brought her to live on the ranch, working alongside his father. Thomas went to university for a year, but decided ranch life suited him better and returned home. Elizabeth, true to her independent spirit, announced she wanted to be a teacher and began studying for the examination. Lucas and Sarah grew older together gracefully, their hair turning gray, lines forming around their eyes from years of laughter and sun. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened and matured like fine wine. One evening in the late 1890s, Lucas and Sarah sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Their grandchildren, William's 3 little ones, played in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucas asked suddenly. "Marrying me, I mean." A drifter with nothing to his name, you could have had so much more. Sarah looked at him in genuine surprise. "Lucas Zane, after all these years, how can you even ask that? I just want to be sure you are happy," he said, taking her hand. "I am more than happy," Sarah said firmly. "I am fulfilled, I am content, I am blessed beyond measure. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. You saw me when others dismissed me. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. And you built this life with me, brick by brick, day by day." Lucas brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Sarah, more now than ever." "And I love you," she replied. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself that summer. Thank you for stopping at our ranch looking for work. Thank you for seeing me as more than just too young." "Youth means more years together," Lucas said, repeating the words he had spoken so many years ago. "I have never regretted a single day of those years." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play, surrounded by the life they had built together. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful. Inside the house, they could hear William and his wife preparing dinner, their laughter floating out through the open windows. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had raised 3 children, built a successful ranch, and created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. But more than any of that, they had found in each other what they had both been searching for without knowing it. Lucas had found his home, his purpose, his reason to stop drifting. And Sarah had found someone who valued her for exactly who she was, who saw her youth not as a limitation, but as a gift. Years continued to pass, bringing with them the inevitable march of time. Lucas and Sarah eventually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, turning over more and more responsibility to William and Thomas. They spent their days in simpler pleasures now, tending the garden, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and enjoying each other's company. Elizabeth did become a teacher, taking a position at the school in Angel's Camp. She married a kind man who supported her career, and they built a house in town but visited the ranch often. She gave Lucas and Sarah 2 more grandchildren to dote on, bringing the total to 8. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the family threw a grand celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors from all over the county attended, and there was music and dancing and enough food to feed everyone twice over. It reminded Sarah of their wedding day, though everything else had changed so much since then. Lucas, his hair now completely silver, led Sarah in a dance just as the sun was setting. The crowd around them faded away, and for a moment they were young again, dancing at their wedding reception under the stars. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked, echoing the question she had asked him so many times over the years. "I am thinking that I would do it all again," Lucas said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time." "As would I," Sarah said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You are the best decision I ever made, Lucas Zane." As they entered their 60s, both Lucas and Sarah remained healthy and active, though they moved a bit slower than they once had. They took great joy in their grandchildren, who ranged from young adults to small children. The ranch had expanded considerably over the years, and now employed several hands permanently. One afternoon, Sarah was working in her garden when she heard a commotion from the front of the house. Wiping her hands on her apron, she walked around to find a young woman standing beside a tired-looking horse, arguing with William. "Please," the girl was saying, "I just need work. I can cook, clean, anything. My father died, and my mother and I have nowhere else to go." Sarah studied the girl. She could not have been more than 18, with fear and determination warring in her eyes. Something about the situation tugged at Sarah's memory. "William," Sarah said quietly, "why do you not let me talk to this young lady?" William nodded and headed back to the barn, leaving Sarah alone with the girl. "What is your name?" Sarah asked kindly. "Susan, madam, Susan Whitlock. And you are looking for work. Yes, madam, anything at all. My mother is ill and we have no money. I thought maybe I could work here and send wages back to her in town. Sarah smiled gently. Come inside, Susan. Let us talk about this properly. Over tea in the kitchen, Susan told her story. Her father had been killed in a mining accident, leaving debts that had consumed everything they owned. Her mother was too sick to work, and Susan was desperate to find a way to support them both. As Sarah listened, she saw herself in this young woman, saw the same determination and fear she had felt when her own father died. And she thought about Lucas, arriving at their ranch all those years ago, equally desperate for a new start. I think we can find something for you here, Sarah said finally. We need help in the house now that I am getting older. The work is not glamorous, but you would have room and board and fair wages. Susan's face lit up with relief and gratitude. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. You will not regret this. I am sure I will not, Sarah said with a knowing smile. That evening she told Lucas about Susan. He listened quietly, then chuckled. You are thinking about us, are you not? He said. About how I showed up here looking for work all those years ago. I cannot help it, Sarah admitted. She reminds me so much of myself at that age, lost and afraid but trying to be brave. Lucas pulled her close. Then we will help her, just as your mother helped me. That is what we do, Sarah. We help people find their way. Susan proved to be a diligent worker and a sweet presence in the house. She reminded Sarah so much of her younger self that it was sometimes startling. And Sarah noticed with amusement that Thomas seemed to find many excuses to be around the house when Susan was working. Do not meddle, Lucas warned her one evening when she mentioned it. I am not meddling, Sarah protested. I am simply observing. You have that look in your eye, Lucas said. The same look your mother had when she hired me, Sarah laughed. Well, that worked out rather well, did not it? That it did, Lucas agreed, kissing her forehead. That it did. As Sarah had suspected, Thomas and Susan began courting that winter. Thomas was gentle and patient with her, understanding her fears about her mother and her uncertain situation. By spring, he had asked her to marry him, and she had tearfully accepted. We are too much alike, Susan confided to Sarah one afternoon. We have both lost parents, both struggled. What if that is not enough? Sarah took the young woman's hands in hers. Love is always enough, Susan. My husband once told me that youth means more years together, more time to build something lasting. You and Thomas are young, yes, but that means you have time to grow together, to support each other, to create the life you want. How did you know your husband was the right one? Susan asked. Sarah thought back to that summer evening by the creek, to Lucas's gray-blue eyes and gentle words. I knew because he saw me, truly saw me when others had dismissed me. He valued me for who I was, not who he thought I should be. That is how you know, Susan, when someone sees your worth and cherishes it. Thomas and Susan were married in a simple ceremony in early summer, and Susan's mother, her health improved with proper care and good food, was able to attend. They built a small house on the ranch property, near William's family, and settled into married life with the same dedication and love that Lucas and Sarah had shown decades before. Watching them, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The cycle continued. Love found those who needed it, and with work and dedication, built something beautiful and lasting. Lucas and Sarah celebrated their 30th anniversary quietly, with just family around them. They were in their early 60s now, still healthy but definitely feeling their age. But their love had not dimmed. If anything, the years had only made it stronger, more comfortable, more essential. 30 years, Lucas mused as they sat on their porch that evening. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I rode up to this ranch, lost and looking for work. And I was 18 years old with a broken heart, Sarah added. Not broken, Lucas corrected. Just waiting for the right person to come along and show you what real love looked like. Which you did, Sarah said, taking his hand. Every single day for 30 years, you have shown me what real love looks like. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable in each other's presence as only people who have spent decades together can be. You think we will have more years? Sarah asked softly. It was a question she had not dared to voice before, but something about the evening, the sense of completion and contentment, made her brave. Lucas squeezed her hand. I hope so. I plan to spend at least another 30 years with you, maybe more. That would make us 93, Sarah laughed. Then we will be 93 together, Lucas said firmly. I am not ready to say goodbye to you yet, Sarah, not by a long shot. And indeed, they did have more years. Good years filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with the satisfaction of seeing their ranch thrive under the next generation's care, with quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. They took daily walks together, moving slower now but still hand in hand. They sat on their porch every evening, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. And they talked, as they had always talked, about everything and nothing, finding endless fascination in each other even after so many years. One warm summer evening in 1905, when they were both in their 70s, Lucas and Sarah sat on their porch watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. William's oldest son now had children of his own, and Elizabeth's daughter had just married and moved back to the area. Look at what we started, Sarah said softly. All of this from two lonely people finding each other. No, Lucas corrected gently. From two lonely people choosing each other day after day, year after year. That is what built all of this. Not chance, but choice. Sarah looked at him, this man who had been her partner, her love, her best friend for nearly 3 decades. His face was lined now, his hair white, but his eyes still held that same warmth and kindness that had first captured her heart. I would choose you again, she said. Every single time I would choose you. As would I, Lucas replied, leaning over to kiss her softly. Forever and always I would choose you. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and their great-grandchildren were called inside for bed, Lucas and Sarah remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. They had lived a good life, full of love and laughter, challenges and triumphs. They had raised children who were raising children of their own. They had built a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. But more than any of that, they had found in each other exactly what they needed. Lucas had found his home, and Sarah had found someone who valued her for exactly who she was. Together, they had proven that love, when nurtured and cherished, could create something truly extraordinary. The years continued their gentle passage, and Lucas and Sarah remained devoted to each other until the very end. They passed away within months of each other in their late 70s, Lucas first, and then Sarah, as if she simply could not bear to be without him for long. Their funeral was attended by hundreds of people from all over the county. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren mourned them, but also celebrated the incredible love story they had witnessed. The Zane Ranch continued to thrive, a testament to the foundation Lucas and Sarah had built on their shared headstone in the Angels Camp Cemetery. Beneath their names and dates was inscribed a simple phrase that summed up their entire philosophy. Youth means more years together. It was a fitting tribute to two people who had understood that love was not about age or circumstance, but about choosing each other, day after day, and building something beautiful together. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the prosperous ranch that bore their name, and in the story of how a lonely cowboy and a heartbroken young woman had found exactly what they needed in each other. The ranch continued through the generations, each new family adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Lucas and Sarah had laid. The main house, expanded and updated over the years, still stood as a testament to their vision. And on warm summer evenings, family members would gather on the porch, telling stories of the couple who had started it all. They spoke of Lucas, who had arrived with nothing but showed them all what true dedication and love looked like. They spoke of Sarah, who had been rejected for being too young but found someone who saw her youth as a blessing rather than a flaw. And they spoke of the life the two had built together, brick by brick and day by day, creating something that would last long after they were gone. The story of Lucas and Sarah became a family legend, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. It was not always easy, the story taught, but when you found the right person, when you chose each other every single day, you could build something extraordinary. Young couples in the family would sometimes stand at Lucas and Sarah's grave, reading the inscription and thinking about their own relationships. Youth means more years together became a kind of family motto, a reminder that age was just a number, and that what truly mattered was the willingness to commit, to work hard, and to cherish each other through all of life's seasons. The legacy of that summer day in 1878, when a lonely cowboy arrived at a small ranch looking for work and found instead his entire future, lived on in countless ways. It lived on in the prosperous ranch that provided for dozens of families. It lived on in the descendants who carried Lucas and Sarah's values into the new century. And it lived on in the simple truth that they had discovered, that real love sees past age and circumstance to recognize what truly matters. Susan and Thomas, who had benefited from Lucas and Sarah's wisdom, lived their own version of the same story, building a strong marriage and raising children who would grow up hearing tales of their great-grandparents. They made sure their children understood where they came from, the values that had built the family legacy, and the importance of choosing love every single day. As the 20th century progressed, and the world changed in ways Lucas and Sarah could never have imagined, the ranch adapted but never lost sight of its roots. The Zane family remained close-knit, gathering for holidays and celebrations, always remembering the two people who had started it all. In 1928, on the 50th anniversary of Lucas and Sarah's wedding, the family gathered for a massive reunion at the ranch. Descendants came from all over California and beyond, bringing with them stories and memories. They erected a monument near the original house, a simple stone marker that commemorated Lucas and Sarah's arrival and the founding of what had become one of the most respected ranches in the region. At the dedication ceremony, Elizabeth, now an elderly woman but still sharp and spirited, spoke about her parents. "My father used to say that he found his home when he found my mother," she told the crowd. "And my mother always said that Papa taught her to see rejection not as an ending but as a redirection toward something better. Together, they showed us all what it means to build a life on love and dedication. We are all here today because two people chose each other and never looked back." There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Elizabeth finished speaking. The monument was unveiled, bearing a bronze plaque with Lucas and Sarah's images, and the story of how they had met and built the ranch that had become home to so many. As the celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing and food, it felt as if Lucas and Sarah were there in spirit, watching over the family they had created. The love they had shared had rippled outward through the generations, touching countless lives and creating something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Their story, which had begun with rejection and loneliness, had transformed into a legacy of love, perseverance, and family. Lucas had been right all those years ago when he told Sarah that youth meant more years together. Those years had been filled with everything that made life worth living: love, laughter, children, grandchildren, hard work, and the satisfaction of building something lasting. And in the end, that was their greatest achievement. Not the successful ranch, not the financial security, not even the large family, though all of those things were wonderful. Their greatest achievement was simply this: they had found each other when both were lost. They had chosen each other every single day, and they had created a love that transcended time and became an inspiration for generations to come. The story of Lucas Zane, the lonely cowboy, and Sarah Zimmerman, the young woman who was rejected for being too young, became more than just family history. It became a testament to the transformative power of love, to the importance of seeing past surface judgments, and to the beautiful truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. In Angels Camp, California, the Zane Ranch still stands, a living memorial to two people who understood that love was not about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. It was about finding someone who saw your worth, choosing them every day, and building something beautiful together, one moment at a time. And somewhere, in the eternal realm where spirits rest, Lucas and Sarah Zane continue their love story, finally having all the time in the world, together forever as they always dreamed they would be.